Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langhate girim yatkrapatamam vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining. So we'll resume our discussion, Canto 4, Chapter 29. So just to catch up on where we are, the chapter starts with Narad Muni explaining the allegorical story of King Puranjan to King Prachinabhari. And that's the first 25 verses. And then Narad Muni gives a direct description of the material world, or more correctly, the cycle of material birth and death, right? And which essentially is the philosophical basis of the story. That Karam Kand will give you repeated birth and death. Right? So if you remember the allegory, there were two parts. One is King Puranjan, and the second is Vedarvi. So 26 to 33 verses are describing the first part of the allegory, which is the material world as a cycle of repeated birth and death. And then beginning from 34th verse for 8 verses, the second part of the allegory is described, which is Bhakti as a solution. Right? So in the second part of the allegory, we see that Puranjan is born again as Vaidarbhi and marries Raja and serves her husband and acquires spiritual perfection to the service of the husband. And that allegory essentially is attaining bhakti through service to Guru. So we were essentially in verse 46, which is Narad Muni describing the second part of the allegory. So let's see. Achyuta, I know you're in India, but are you able to read the translations?
Yes, Prabhu, I can do that. Yeah.
So we are in 4th Canto, 29th chapter, beginning from verse 46. Yada yasya anugranati Bhagwan atma bhavitah sajahati matim loke vedecha paranishtitam.
One second, Prabhu. When a person is fully engaged in devotional service, he is favored by the Lord, who bestows his causeless mercy. At such a time, the awakened devotee gives up all material activities and ritualistic performances mentioned in the Vedas.
So this is Narad Muni now talking about the philosophical basis of the second allegorical story, which is the potency of bhakti. So in the previous verses, especially in the previous 4 verses, Narad Muni had given a description of those who cannot see the Lord. And he goes through the process of saying, not by karma, not by jnana, not by austerities, is one qualified to see the Lord. In these verses, he will give the qualification of one who can see the Lord. Right? So he says when a person is fully engaged in devotional service, so only the devotees can see the Lord. So the Lord is only visible through bhakti. Now, Prachinabhari may ask that how does one become a devotee? Right. So Narad Muni says that one becomes a devotee through one whose devotion is to the Lord. So Atma Bhavita. In the translation, Srila Prabhupada translates Atma Bhavita as one who's fully engaged in devotional service. And in the purport, he says that Atma Bhavita also means that one who's fully engaged in preaching. So he said the word Atma Bhavita also indicates that a devotee is always engaged in preaching to deliver the conditioned soul. So the point that's being made here is that one becomes a devotee through the mercy of another devotee. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that when a devotee sees a sincere conditioned soul looking to escape the samsara, then he prays in his mind. He says, he prays to Krishna that please accept this person and deliver him from samsara. When the Lord hears this prayer, he becomes merciful to that person. And because of the mercy of the Lord, this person now becomes a devotee. He gives up absorbing his mind in Loke Karma Kanda, in Loke Vede. So Loke means material affairs and Vede means Karma Kanda. So essentially what it means that the Lord's mercy comes through another devotee. Right? So just like we saw that whether we receive the devotee through Malaya Dvaja. Right? So similarly, same point is being made as a philosophical point here, that one receives the mercy of the Lord through the mercy of another devotee. And each one of us, we can either relate to it or understand that we came to Krishna consciousness because someone sincerely prayed for us. Whether it was somebody preaching to us, a friend, a relative, but of this there is no doubt that we did not come to Krishna consciousness because of our own efforts only. There was this, in Back to Godhead, they used to have this. I'm not sure now. I haven't been subscribing to the magazine for many years, but earlier on they used to have this like a one pager in which devotees would share how they came to Krishna consciousness. And even though every devotee had like a unique story, but one common thread was that there was somebody who gave them mercy. How that came in was different, but the fact that somebody gave the mercy is ubiquitous. So what happens when one receives the mercy of another devotee and also engages in bhakti? Then his taste for material activities declines. And on the flip side, a person who is covered by different designations, material designations, finds it difficult to engage in devotional service. So here it is said, at such time, a awakened devotee gives up all material activities and ritualistic performance. Right? So Prabhupada says in the purport that the word Atma Bhavita indicates that the Lord is awakened in one's mind if one constantly thinks of him. A pure devotee is always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padar Vindyo. So this particular phrase, Savai Mana Krishna Padar Vindyo, Prabhupada will use it, I'm guessing, at least another 3 times in the purports, maybe even more. Later on, he says that Atma Bhavita also indicates that the devotee is always engaged in preaching to deliver the conditioned souls. Then he talks about the 6 Goswamis, Nana Shastra Vicharana Nipano, Sadharma Samsthapako, Lokanam Hita Karano. And so the focus is on Lokanam Hita Karano. That they're always thinking about how to deliver the conditioned souls. In the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada has described Uttamadhikari as one who is constantly making plans to make others devotees. That's the characteristic of an Uttamadhikari. Now, in terms of starting one's bhakti by the mercy of another devotee, one may think that it's only used to start, right? And then when the person is more advanced, he's free from contamination, then at that time the person is getting direct guidance from Krishna, right? So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 10:10, Dadami buddhi yogam tam, that I give them the enlightenment from within. While that is true, but factually also, as the devotees make advancement, the need to take and give guidance also intensifies. So we see in the life of advanced devotees that they're constantly in this mood of taking guidance and where needed, giving guidance. Like Rupa Goswami is going to Sanatana Goswami, asking him questions that, why is my chanting? Why have I lost my taste for chanting? We see Jiva Goswami, erudite scholar, constantly taking guidance from his uncles, Rupa Sanatana Goswamis. And we see very, very exalted devotees coming in the presence of Mahaprabhu and asking simple questions. Mahaprabhu himself sets an example when he asked questions to Ramananda Roy. So what Krishna provides from within is the ability to appreciate that guidance. It's not a substitute for the guidance. It's not that when a devotee becomes advanced and he says, now it's only between me and Krishna, I don't need anybody else. That's not going to work. So Srila Prabhupada would say the same things to different, to so many people. Some people would make it their own life, and some people would just walk out without any difference. Right? Same guidance, but different level of compliance to that guidance. That's the difference. In one case, the super soul opens up the heart and the mind to receive the guidance. In other case, not so much. So Prabhupada says that this is the stage of becoming free from contaminations of the material world. At such a time, a devotee makes friends with another devotee, and his engagement in the material activities ceases completely. At that time, he attains the favor of the Lord and loses his faith in material civilization, which begins with Varnashram Dharma. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks clearly about one becoming liberated from Varnashram Dharma, the most exalted system of human civilization. So the last line of Prabhupada's purport is interesting, that he says by that one needs to become liberated from Varnashram Dharma, which means that it's not good enough. And then he says the most exalted system of human civilization. So it is apparently condemned and glorified in the same sentence. And the understanding is that Varnashram Dharma is glorified as a means to an end, but it is condemned as an end in itself. So those who follow Varnashram Dharma to purify themselves so that they can practice bhakti, for them it is glorified. But those who practice Varnashram Dharma just for the sake of Varnashram Dharma, Mahaprabhu clearly says that one needs to become liberated from this situation. Okay, moving on to verse 47. Okay. So, Achyuta, you're not able to read, right? Or is this an old?
No, Guruji, I won't be. I just need to go and
You won't be able to, okay.
yeah, make up the details. Sorry.
No worries. Prem Kishore Prabhu, can you read? You need to fix your mic, right? It keeps acting up. Okay, so while he's doing that, I'll read the Sanskrit of the next verse, 47. Tasmad karmasu barismana ajnanadartha kashishu martha drishtim kruta shrotra sparsheshvapashata vastushu.
Yeah. My dear king, one second. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I know you have.
Prabhu, I can read.
Varsha. Okay, thank you, Madhuri. Please go ahead.
Text 47. My dear King Barhishman, you should never, out of ignorance, take to the Vedic rituals or to fruitive activity, which may be pleasing to hear about or which may appear to be the goal of self-interest. You should never take these to be the ultimate goal of life.
So we see Narad Muni's mood changing. So far, he has been instructing King Prachinabari, is also called Barishman, indirectly. Like he's telling the story of King Puranjan. Then he says, well, this is an allegory. This is how the allegory is explained. Now he's giving direct instruction. Right? Now he's saying that you should never, out of ignorance, take to the Vedic rituals or to fruitive activities. Right? So he is directly instructing him now to stop the Karam Kanda activities that he has been indulging in. So the whole purpose of all this is this. The whole purpose of telling the allegorical story, giving the philosophical basis is to finally be at a point where the heart and mind of Prachinabari is open to the direct instructions of Narad Muni. Right? He says, don't be interested in such temporary benefits. So he's cautioning him that out of ignorance, don't accept the Vedic instructions as ultimate, which may be pleasing in passing. So, of course, these are instructions in the Karma Kanda section. Similar instruction given by Krishna to Arjun and Bhagavad Gita. This is in verse 42, 43. Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadanti paschita, where he says that men of small knowledge are very attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities. Right? And then Krishna says, give this up. In the purport, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Prabhupada quotes Bhakti Vinod Thakur as saying that materialistic studies are the glare of Maya only, for they are an obstacle to spiritual progress. So while Narad Muni is instructing Prachinabari to give up the fruitive aspects of the Vedic instructions, Bhakti Vinod Thakur expands that. Now, really speaking, the Vedas also include materialistic studies, but here the focus is more on the contemporary education that people get, and Bhakti Vinod Thakur describes this as the glare of Maya. So, glare meaning that the quality of a glare is that it blinds one with its brightness. So it looks like it's something good and potent and something attractive, but actually it is blinding one to one's spiritual path. Prabhupada later on says that a section of the Indian population known as the Arya Samajis laid too much stress on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas. So the Arya Samajis, they were established, I believe in the 19th century. I know Dayanand Saraswati was the person who established it. and they're essentially mostly atheistic. I mean, they're at least impersonalists, but mostly they're atheistic. But interestingly, they do subscribe to the Karma Kanda aspect of the Vedas, performance of yajna, etc. So Prabhupada gives that as an extreme example. I mean, these people don't even have the conception of even the Karma Kanda portion of the Vedas in its true sense. It leads one to Krishna, but the Arya Samajis, they don't even have that conception there. So Prabhupada concludes that the Vedic performances are, of course, very, very glittering and pleasing to hear about, but they do not serve the real purpose of life. Okay, verse 48. Swam lokam na viduste vai yatra devo janardana ahurdhum radhiyo vedam sakarmakam matadvidaha.
Those who are less intelligent accept Vedic ritualistic ceremonies as all in all. They do not know that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand one's own home, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead lives. Not being interested in their real home, they are illusioned and search after other homes.
So after hearing the previous verse, King Prachinabari may ask Narad Muni that if what you are saying is right, then why have I been instructed to follow Karma Kanda? Because I did not do it on my own. I have done under the instruction of the Brahmanas and the priests and the sages and the Gyanis. They have, on the authority of the Vedas, asked me to do that. So, in response to that implicit question, Narad Muni says that the reason these people give this instruction is because they do not know about Vaikuntha, where the Lord resides. This is Krishna Chakravarti commenting, saying that such people, they only know about Svarga because of Dhumradhiya. Dhumradhiya essentially means contaminated intelligence. And what do they say as a result of this? They say that karma is the ultimate message of the Vedas. So quoting 11:14:3, this is praised by Lord Brahma. So here the Lord says that by the influence of time, the transcendental sound of Vedic knowledge was lost at the time of annihilation. Therefore, when subsequent creation took place, I spoke the Vedic knowledge to Brahma, because I myself am the religious principles enunciated in the Vedas. I'm sorry, this is not the praise. The praise to Lord Brahma by Lord Brahma are in the 10th chapter, 14th chapter. 11:14 is actually part of the Uddhav Gita. And this verse is very similar to what Krishna says to Arjun in the 4th chapter, where he says that Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajeshwar. So a very similar point that is made. So because this knowledge has been lost over time, the so-called experts in the Vedas, they're also instructing based on that incomplete knowledge. Right? So based on the same Vedas, there is Karma Kanda, there is also Karma Mimamsa. Right? So Karma Mimamsa is one step more than Karma Kanda. Like Karma Kanda actually acknowledges the future path to Krishna. Karma Mimamsa, it denies the existence of the Lord. It denies the existence of the spiritual world. So Narad Muni is essentially speaking about these people, that they don't even know that there is a spiritual world. They don't even know there is Krishna who is residing. And the reason is that they lack the information. So Prabhupada in the purport says that one should be interested in the information about the spiritual Vaikuntha planets, and in particular the planet known as Golok Vrindavan, and should learn the art of going there by the simple method of devotional service, beginning with Shravana Kirtana Vishnu Smarana. And then he quotes Kalira Doshane Rajan, that simply by chanting, one can Mukta Sangha Param Vrajayat. So in Karma Kanda, if one performs something incompletely, no results are given. Right? You do everything 99.9%, still no results, because it should be done completely. Then in Karma Kanda, if something is performed incorrectly, then actually the opposite results are given. That's the nature of Karma Kanda. That you do a yajna, there is trutis, there is mistakes, the opposite comes. Right? Nrigi was giving in charity. Accidentally, he took back a cow that was already given in charity and gave it away again. So he became a lizard. However, in bhakti, if something is done incompletely, then Krishna gives further opportunities to correct it. The sixth chapter Bhagavad Gita verse that a yogi, if he's in the advanced stage, then he gets another opportunity by taking birth in the family of devotees. Same thing for devotees also, that if they're not able to perfect the devotional life, then Krishna continues to give them ad infinitum more and more opportunities to complete. So it's not that incomplete means no result. There's in Karma Kanda. In bhakti, incomplete means that you get another chance. Not only do you get another chance, but you begin from where you ended. Right? So you get both. Krishna preserves whatever you have done, and he gives you another chance to continue. Now, if in Karma Kanda you do something incorrectly, you get the opposite result. In bhakti, if you do something incorrectly, then you get two things. You get forgiveness and you get mercy. Mercy in terms of more chances. Right? Somebody is chanting the name offensively. Right? And then because of the Nama Pran, bhakti may not proceed at the desired result, at the desired rate, but because of whatever he is chanting, Krishna makes arrangements for the person to get more association with the devotees, to get some taste from the chanting. Right? The case of Ajamel, he was chanting, he stopped chanting, and then Krishna gave him another chance. So that's the big difference between the process of Karma Kanda and Bhakti. Okay, moving on to verse 49. Astriya dharmahe pragagrahe karsnayena kshiti mandalam stabdo brahad vadahan mani karmanave siyat param tat karma harito shamya savidya tanmatirya.
My dear king, the entire world is covered with the sharp points of kusha grass, and on the strength of this, you have become proud because you have killed various types of animals in sacrifices. Because of your foolishness, you do not know that devotional service is the only way one can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot understand this fact. Your only activities should be those that can please the Personality of Godhead. Our education should be such that we can become elevated to Krishna consciousness.
Now, Narad Muni is speaking even more directly to Prachinabhari, right? So initially he was recommending but take to the path of bhakti, give up your karma kanda activities. Now he's saying that you are actually foolish, that you have been killing animals, right? Because you did not, you did, so he's saying you're foolish means that you're ignorant, that you do not know this basic fact that the only way to please Krishna is by bhakti. Because Prachinabhari was famous for laying kushagras all over the surface of the globe. Kushagras is basically needed to perform sacrifices. So in the earlier on it was said that he would finish one sacrifices and then go and perform another sacrifice right away. So in this way, he was spreading kushagras all over the surface of the globe, right? And then Narad Muni says that what did you do as a result of this? You killed various animals and you became proud. All this is nothing but your foolishness, right? So he's Vishnu Chakravarti says that he's saying that Narad Muni is saying that taught by ignorant people, you have become a fool. You think you're a great performer of yajnas because you have killed animals and have bad content, right? He says tabda. So then Prachinabhari might say then, what is the supreme activity? And Narad Muni answers that question saying, those that are pleasing to the Lord, that is the supreme activity. Everything else is not desirable activity or not even knowledge, right? So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes this interesting point that what is sin and what is education. So he defines both sin and education on an absolute platform. Right? So the point that he makes is that any activity not done for the pleasure of Krishna should be considered to be sinful. And any education that does not lead to Krishna is false education. And so he says that in this verse, Narad Muni directly insults the king because he was engaged in performing sacrifices that entail the killing of a great number of animals. The king was thinking that he was great for having performed so many sacrifices, but the great sage Narad directly chastises him, informing him that his animal killing only leads to his being puffed up with false prestige. Actually, anything that is done which does not lead to Krishna consciousness is a sinful activity. And any education that does not lead one to understand Krishna is false education. If Krishna consciousness is missing, one is simply engaged in false activities and false educational pursuits. So this was one of the recurring theme of Srila Prabhupada, that the contemporary education, he did not condemn the education per se, but then he would say that it is incomplete. Like he would say that he went to this college and he says you have this chemistry department to analyze compounds, and you have this department. Where is the department for the study of soul? The point you are making is that should also be there. It's not that one becomes materially ignorant. That's not what the Vedas say. It's not what Prabhupada said. But without it being rounded off by an understanding of the self and the Lord, then the education is false education. Okay, moving on to verse 50. Harirdeha Bhritamatma Swayam Prakritirishwaraha Tatpad Moolam Sharanam Yatakshemo Nanamaha.
Sri Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the super soul and guide of all living entities who have accepted material bodies within this world. He is the supreme controller of all material activities in material nature. He is also our best friend, and everyone should take shelter at his lotus feet. In doing so, one's life will be auspicious.
So Narad Muni enunciates 4 characteristics of the Lord in this verse. Right? So he says he is Hari Deha Dhritam Atma, that he is the soul of all living entities, Supermatma. Then Swayam Prakriti Ishvara, that he is the mother and the father of the universe. Then Tat Pad Moolam Sharanam, that his feet is the shelter of all beings. And Yatak Shemo Nranam, that from his feet arises all auspiciousness. So Prabhupada in the purport, he takes each of these points and then he kind of elaborates on it, gives scriptural references, basically to further describe these characteristics of the Supreme Lord. Right. So for the Paramatma feature, Hari Deha Dhritam Atma, Srila Prabhupada quotes 1860, 2 verses he quotes, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Videshwar Janatishtate from 18th chapter, and Sarvasya Charanidhi Sanimishto. This is 1515. So to make the point that Paramatma is present everywhere. Then Prabhupada says that the living entity is within the body and the super soul is accompanying the living entity within the body. He is called the Antaryami or the Chaitya Guru. Everyone is being directed by the super soul within the body. So the better part of valor is to take his directions and be happy. Tesham Sadata Yuktanam, Bhagavad Gita 10:10. So taking the directions of the Paramatma essentially means following the path of bhakti. Right? And then Prabhupada says this is because although the super soul is in everyone's heart, he talks only to the pure devotees who constantly engage in his service. And then he quotes Chaitanya Bhagavat, Antilila 345, that one who has fixed his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna is to understood as having the best education and having studied all the Vedas. And then Prabhupada provides 6 references to confirm that the real purpose of any study is to know about Krishna. Right? So the way Prabhupada develops this is that he first says Krishna is Paramatma, is everywhere. He is in the heart of everyone. He is directing from within as Antaryami and Chaitya Guru. And then he takes this fork, saying that even though Paramatma is guiding everyone, not everyone is taking his guidance. So who takes his guidance? The devotees take his guidance. And taking his guidance means executing the process of bhakti. And the 6 references you can see in the purport. He quotes from Bhagavad Antilila, the one I read, 345. He quotes from CC Adi Leela. So in the first verse of the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it was noted that the Raja Rishis, they would they would receive the instructions in the parampara, and then they would train the praja. Right? That was the process. they would train them in three ways. They would train them in knowledge, in culture, and in devotion. So the knowledge they would give is to know matter, spirit, and control. Right? That's the knowledge they would give. So this is described in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So the kings would essentially give this understanding that this is matter, this is spirit, and this is the Lord. Now, modern education is focusing on only one aspect, which is matter. Right? And Prabhupada says, because they focus on only one of the three aspects, they don't speak about the self as being a soul, they don't speak about the super soul. That is why he says modern education is destined to fail. Right? So this is education from the perspective of knowledge. Education from the perspective of culture is learning how to deal with others. And so Chanakya Pandit, he gives this in his teaching that Matravad Paradareshu Patradraveshu Lostravat Atmavad Sarvabhuteshu Yah Paschati Sa Pandita. So one who considers another's wife as his mother, another's possessions as a lump of dirt, and treats all other living entities as he would himself, is considered to be learned. So this is the knowledge of, this is the training in culture. How to deal with the opposite sex, how to deal with property that does not belong to others, how to deal with other people. So that is the training in culture. And finally, there's the knowledge of devotion. How to practice bhakti as per the Bhakti Sutras. Right? So Prahlad Maharaj, he talks about in the 7th canto, right? He talks about the angas of bhakti, the 9 processes of bhakti. That is the knowledge of devotion. So in this way, modern education fails on all three fronts. It does not give the knowledge that can help distinguish one's self from matter and the Lord. It does not give culture, how to deal with others and others' possession, and it does not give devotion. So that's why modern education is compared to Putana. So when Putana entered into Vrindavan, she took on a very beautiful form of a young lady, young girl. And she was so attractive and effulgent that she bewildered everybody in Vraja. Right? She crossed all the gates, she went into the house, all the way into the innermost sanctum of the house where Krishna was there. Nobody stopped her. So she bewildered everybody, with the exception of one person. She was not able to bewilder Krishna. So Krishna was the only one who was able to identify her for who she is. So similarly, in the current day and age, Krishna has appeared as the Bhagavatam and as the holy name. So only the Bhagavatam and the holy name are able to help distinguish between the real and the false instructions. So that's why the repeated instructions is one should take guidance from the Bhagavatam and one should constantly chant. So Srila Prabhupada says that Putna can also enter into spiritual organizations. They can do meetings, resolutions, and dissolutions. And that can go on. Right? And the Prabhupada gives the remedy also. He says all that can go on. During Prabhupada's life only, the GBC was new at the time, but they would have all these debates and discussions and dissensions. The only thing was at that time Prabhupada was there. So they would go to Prabhupada, Prabhupada help us. And Prabhupada would complain that I don't want anything to do with management, but he would still come in and help them. But Prabhupada would say all this will go on, but the reason that they will never be straight is because they will never stop chanting or never cease to take guidance from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? So as long as these two things are going on, one can protect oneself from the symbolic Putna of modern education. Okay, I'll do one more verse, and after that we'll pause for discussion. Verse 51. Savai priyatamas chatma yato na bhayam anvapi iti ved savai vidwan yo vidwan sa gurur hari.
One who is engaged in devotional service has not the least fear in material existence. This is because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the super soul and friend of everyone. One who knows the secret is actually educated, and one thus educated can become the spiritual master of the world. One who is an actually bona fide spiritual master, representative of Krishna, is not different from Krishna.
So in this verse, Narad Muni is describing the results of worshipping the Lord. Right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this and says that that the Lord is the most beloved, though the Jiva is also dear, because by worshipping Devas and receiving Swarga, there is only suffering. So why is this distinction made? Because those who worship the Lord, there is no fear and no suffering. So one who knows this truth about the different consequences of worshipping the Lord and anybody else, one who knows the truth about the two Atmas, the Jiva and the Paramatma, is the one who is truly learned. And then Narad Muni says that such a person should be considered to be your guru, and he should be worshipped like the Lord. Right? So the path, so after having established the supremacy of bhakti by showing the shortcomings in the other path and the absolute results from bhakti, Narad Muni is now explaining the process. The first step in the process of bhakti is that you take shelter of a guru. Who is a guru? One who knows the difference between the consequences of following karma kanda and bhakti. One who knows very well the difference between the two atmas. And he says, how do you take shelter of the guru? You worship him like the Lord. So there are four attributes that are assigned to the guru. And an educated person, it can actually be for even those who are aspiring, but one who is spiritually educated. So Narad Muni gives four attributes. One, he says that bhakti gives complete protection. Second, that Lord is that the Paramatma is friend to all. Third, that Krishna is the Paramatma. And fourth is that know the two Atmas, which is the soul and the super soul, to be distinct. Right? So one who knows these four things is qualified to become a guru. One who knows the potency of bhakti, one who knows that the Paramatma is present in everybody and is a friend to all, one who knows that Krishna is the source of the Paramatma, and one who knows that Krishna is distinct from the Jiva, is a person in knowledge, can be taken, considered as a guru, and should be worshipped as non-different from the guru. So Prabhupada in the purport says that the devotee is therefore always engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord. Such a person is a true guru. And he quotes Padma Purana, Satkam Nipuno Vipro Mantra Tantra Vishadaha. A Vaishnav Guru na Shayada Vaishnava Swa Pako Guru. That even if a Brahman is very learned in Vedic scriptures and knows the 6 occupational duties of a Brahman, he cannot become a guru. Right? So 6 occupational duties are Patan Patan, Yajan Yajan, Dan, and Pratikriya. Reading scriptures, teaching scriptures, performing yagyas for self, performing yagyas for others, accepting in charity and giving in charity. Right? So these are considered to be the 6 occupational duties of a Brahman. But even if he knows the 6 duties, is an expert in the scriptures, in the Padma Purana said that unless he is a devotee of the Lord, he cannot become a guru. And then on the flip side, it is said that if one is born in a family of dog eaters, but is a pure devotee of the Lord, he can become a spiritual master. So Prabhupada says the conclusion is that one cannot become a spiritual master unless he is a pure devotee of the Lord. And then later on he says that success in life means accepting a spiritual master who knows Krishna as the only supreme beloved personality. One should worship such a confidential devotee of the Lord. Okay, so let me pause here and see if there's any discussion. Okay, if not, we'll continue. Verse 52. Narad Vacha Prashna evam hi sanchinno Bhavata Purusha Shaba Atra vadato bhuyam Nishamya Shunishchitam.
The great saint Narada continued, O great personality, I have replied properly about all that you have asked me. Now hear another narration that is accepted by saintly persons and is very confidential.
So, Narad Muni concludes the instructions about the direct description of samsara and bhakti as a solution. Right. So, as an expert preacher, he also understands that what would motivate Prachina Bahari further. Right. So there is the philosophical instructions that are given. Right. So he has given the philosophy. There is a direct instruction that is given, but then there is still the gap between getting that instruction and acting upon it. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad says that Narad Muni understands everything that Prachina Bahari understands everything that Narad Muni has told him. but he's still hesitant to act upon it. So he's considering calling his sons back, Prachetas, handing over the kingdom to them, making sure that the transition is smooth, and then proceeding to the forest to act upon the instructions that he has received from Narad, right? Or he is maybe waiting that let my sons come back. They have taken this vow to perform austerities for 10,000 years. Let me wait for that time. When they come back, I will hand over the kingdom to them and then proceed. So essentially, this indicates that he was still not ready to renounce fully, and he still maintained material attachments. Right? So there's a difference between Gyan and Vigyan. Right? There's a difference between knowledge and knowledge that you act upon, realized knowledge. So Prabhupada in the purport says that actually this is the position for most of the people, that they accept a guru, they listen to the guru, but when the guru gives them instructions, they will hesitate. So the duty of the guru is to instruct the disciple, as long as it does not come to the understanding. Right? So Prabhupada is talking about the compassion of the guru. That it's not that the guru will give instructions and say that whether you follow it or not, that's fine. So Prabhupada says the guru will keep instructing over and over and through different means until the person comes to the understanding that the ultimate goal is by performing devotional service. So Prabhupada also mentions that bhakti should actually be taken right from the beginning of one's life. And he quotes Prahlad Maharaj that Komarachit Pragyo Dharman Bhagavata. Right from Komar, right from the early stage, one should take to Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, he is simply wasting time. So Prabhupada makes this point to show the mood of Narad Muni. That Narad Muni has considered that Prachinabhari, he has wasted all his life. So he does not want him to waste even a single moment. So in order to now create this sense of urgency, Narad Muni will tell another allegorical story of a deer. Now, this story is a lot shorter. Essentially, it's just the story is in one verse only. But again, through allegory, he's going to create this sense of urgency in King Prachinabhari. Because procrastination is essentially a quality of lack of conviction. So we may have the knowledge, but the reason that we may not act upon it is because we lack conviction. In 18th chapter, Krishna actually says that procrastination is a quality of tamoguna. A person in mode of ignorance is constantly procrastinating. In Ramayana, when Vibhishan, he leaves Ravan, and then he comes over to Lord Ram, so he is intercepted by the soldiers of Lord Ram, because he is obviously a Rakshasa and they are getting ready to kill him. So Vibhishan at that point says that immediately go and tell Lord Ram that I want to take shelter of him right now. So he is experiencing that sense of urgency, and he wants to convey it also, right? And the reason the Acharya says that Vibhishan himself is concerned that if he procrastinates, then he may change his desires. So that's why he does not even want to go down that route. He says, right now I'm convinced that I need to take shelter of Lord Ram. Do not delay. So the inspiration in the heart of a practicing devotee is like a spark. And within the heart of a mature devotee, it's like a blazing fire. So a spark may get extinguished by a small wind, but not a blazing fire. Blazing fire actually grows with the wind. So that's why the recommendation is that when the sadhakas, they receive inspiration, they should act upon it as quickly as possible. Whether it is through the festivals, whether it is by attending somebody's lecture, whether it is by receiving instructions from the Guru Maharaj, whether it is by talking to other devotees, because as such the bhakti in them is weak. But if it has been momentarily strengthened, then they should act upon it expeditiously. The more they will delay, the more likely the chances is that that inspiration will also go away. And we see over here the difference between the mood of a bona fide guru like Narad Muni and a more materialistic guru like Shukracharya, right? So if Prachina Bhari leaves the palace and goes to the jungle, then Narad Muni will lose a prestigious disciple, right? So he has the emperor of the world as a disciple, which means that he can go to the palace, he can enjoy all the prestige. But Narad Muni is not concerned about that, right? He's just concerned about the welfare of the disciple. In the case of Shukracharya, he was concerned that if Bali Maharaj takes to the shelter of Vamandev, then who will maintain him? Because Shukracharya will be maintained with a lot of opulence by his disciple. So which is why he was constantly discouraging Bali Maharaj from taking shelter of Vamandev. He knew very well that this dwarf is Lord Vishnu, right? But he keeps discouraging him. So the mood of a bona fide guru is reflected in this instruction of Narad Muni. And Prabhupada also would say that better than having many stars is having one moon. Another way of saying that better than having many disciples who are not really practicing, it is better to have one devotee, one disciple who goes back to Godhead. So Narad Muni wants to inspire Prachina Bhari to quickly act upon the instruction, leave his throne and go to the forest, even though it means that he will lose an emperor as a disciple. So Srila Prabhupada would ask a disciple to boil the milk. It's a phrase that he would use. Essentially what it means is that quality is better than quantity, right? When you condense the milk, then the quantity reduces, but then you get the essence of the milk. So the quality that Prabhupada had in himself, he was instilling in his disciples, right? The quality that Narad Muni has in himself. So Narad Muni himself has this sense of urgency with regard to the execution of bhakti, and therefore he is able to impart the same sense of urgency to Prachina Bhari. Same thing with Srila Prabhupada, that those who came in contact with Prabhupada, or even secondary contact, came in contact with people who came in contact with Prabhupada, they always commented on the fact that Prabhupada would instill this sense of urgency, that time is wasting. Perfect your life, go back to God and make this your last life. And don't even wait for the end of the life. You liberate yourself today, right away. Right? So that was the sense that Prabhupada would instill, because he himself had. And we see the same thing in Narad Muni. Right? So, as a sincere person, preacher, he will not be satisfied until his disciple takes to the path of bhakti right away. And we'll see that he will now speak that allegory to instill that. Okay, so verse 53. Shrudram charam. So different. Shudram charam samanasam sharnimitva rattam sadangri ganasama shulubdakarnam agre vrikan asutriptu viganyayantam prasthe mrigam mrigaya luptak banavinnam.
My dear king, please search out that deer who's engaged in eating grass in a very nice flower garden along with his wife. That deer is very much attached to his business and he's enjoying the sweet singing of the bumblebees in his garden. Just try to understand his position. He is unaware that before him is a tiger which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. Behind the deer is a hunter who's threatening to pierce him with death is imminent.
So this is the allegorical story of the deer, right? And I have a table that I'll share with you, which essentially talks about the various symbolism. Much limited in this, but essentially the message is of the story is that one can die at any time. So that's why one should take the resolve to take to spirituality right away. Yeah, so Prabhupada says, the conclusion is that one who lives like a deer will be killed in due course of time. Vedic literature therefore advise that we should understand our constitutional position and take devotional service before death comes. As stated in the Bhagavatam, after many births we have attained this human form. Therefore, before death comes, we should engage ourselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is the fulfillment of human life. Okay. So the next verse is a very, very long verse, which is actually a prose. It does not have, as far as I could see, does not have meter in it. So I'll kind of read it out to the best of my ability, and then we'll do the translation. Sumana sama dharmanam strinam sharanashrame pushpamadhu gandhavad shudratam kamya karma vipakajam kama sukhalavam jahivya pastyadi vichinvitam mithuni bhuyatad abhiniveshita manasam sadangari ganasam gitavad ati manohara vanitadi janalpsheva atitaram ati pralobita karnam agre vikrayutva atmanayurharato horatrantan kalava visheshana vigyagreshu vibrantam prashut eva propsham anupravrato lubdka pratanontaha sharneyamiha paravidyati tammimam atmanam mahorajam vinahridyam drashtum arhasati.
My dear king, woman who's very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With women, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way, the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. He is United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death who's trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides.
So the previous verse was Narad Muni giving the allegory of the deer. In this one, he is explaining the previous verse. So the main point that he's talking about is that one tends to establish a materially a zone of comfort. And bhakti means going out of that comfort zone. So for Prachinavari, it means leaving the palace and going to the jungle, right? So in his previous life, when Narad was the son of a maidservant, so if you remember in the first canto, that he was traveling in the jungle, and then while meditating, the Lord appeared within his heart. And then he disappeared. And Narad Muni was agitated. He tried to make the Lord appear again, but did not. The Lord did not appear and said that there was a sound that said that, a voice that said that you're not qualified to see. So what was the disqualification of Narad Muni? That he was too much attached to the serenity of the forest. Okay? Because he sought the forest as a place of peace. Right? Prabhupada explains that in the purport. So he was contaminated by the mode of goodness. And the Lord wanted Narad Muni to be able to practice and preach everywhere. Not just in the mode of goodness, but in the mode of passion and mode of ignorance. And we see actually happening. Right? Narad Muni is preaching to the hunter who is half killing animals, can't be more in the mode of ignorance. He goes to the palaces of kings and emperors, mode of passion, and also preaching in the mode of goodness. So that's what the Lord wanted Narad Muni to do. So for Narad Muni, stepping out of the comfort zone meant leaving the forest. For Prachinavari, stepping out of the comfort zone means going into the forest. Right? So opposite, apparently opposite, but essentially, basically taking the person to that path that gives him the best qualification to execute devotional service. The Narad Muni was being trained by the Lord to preach everywhere. So the Lord did not want him to become addicted to the mode of goodness. For Prachinavari, Narad Muni did not want him to be addicted to the mode of passion. So he's saying, go to the forest. Forest is considered to be in the mode of goodness, and practice bhakti over there. So we see that for 4 chapters, from chapter 25 to 28, Narad Muni has been preaching indirectly to Prachinavari, right? So the allegorical story. Now he is preaching directly to him. So if you remember the offenses to the chanting of the holy name, the 9th offense is that preaching the glories of the holy name to the faithless person. Right? So there is a counter to that offense also, which is not preaching the glories of the holy name to the faithful person. So when Narad Muni initially approached Prachinavari, he did not directly preach the glories of the holy name to him, because he lacked that faith. But with the association of Narad Muni, with the understanding of the philosophy, now he has faith. Now Narad Muni is preaching directly the glories of the holy name. Right? So you see that he is protecting himself from the offense both ways. That initially he was not preaching to the faithless. It does not, the Prabhupada would say, it does not mean that you completely avoid them, but you preach in a different way, which is what Narad Muni does. For us, he would say that you don't have to talk about the more intimate aspects of the philosophy. You can preach to them in a more general way. Either just say that you have become a vegetarian, or say that just chant and see what happens. You can also say that just by chanting, your material problems will be solved. Prabhupada would say that you can ask them to take Gaurnitai dolls to their home and just say that they're auspicious for the house, or just say they're dolls. Somehow else they can, right? So this is all indirect preaching to avoid the ninth offense. But then at the same time, when a person becomes sufficiently advanced, then it's an offense not to preach to the directly. Sometimes and different devotees who are preaching have different modes, but sometimes we see that they get very much anchored in that mode. Like there are some people who are preaching through like yoga studios, and there the preaching is mostly indirect. But that indirect never becomes direct. So they keep preaching just indirectly. And the people that are being preached, they never make any real spiritual advancement. They may become slightly favorable, but they just get too much in that whole loop of indirect preaching. And then on the other hand, there are some who are direct preachers, and they will go to anybody and everybody and say that you're going to hell and you surrender to Krishna, and they basically turn that away. So ideal is demonstrated by Narad Muni that when appropriate, and in this case it's the same person, preach indirectly, and when appropriate, preach directly. So we see the we see the same mood when Narad Muni is instructing Srila Vyasadeva. Right? Because so what does Narad Muni chastise Vyasadeva about? He says that you have given people the means for making material advancement, piously, but making material advancement. But you have not given them Krishna consciousness. He said that is verily condemned. So in a way, Srila Vyasadeva has done what they're not technically, but one of the terms is bridge preaching. Bridge preaching is that it's basically outreach. You're reaching out to people who have very little interest, no prior experience. So basically what Narad Muni is chastising Vyasadeva about, that you have done a lot of bridge preaching. But what about those who take to it and are ready for the next step? Which is why then Srila Vyasadeva went into the meditation and gave the Bhagavatam, which takes which preaches directly the glories of Krishna. And so the understanding is that bridge preaching is a means to an end and not an end in itself, but it is important. One should understand that it needs to be there, right? And it will protect the preacher and the receiver from offenses. But it needs to lead to something else. Just like a bridge connects two places, it needs to lead to something else. So, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport about the journey of a person who is immersed in family life. Right? So this is essentially the deer analogy. So Prabhupada says that a person attached to the Grihastha ashram is basically attached for two things: for palatable food and sex enjoyment. Then he says that the dealings with the wife and the children also attract the mind of the person. But then in due course of time, all these charms wear off. Right? So the attraction to the wife wears off. Prabhupada writes, it's kind of humorous case that then the wife starts making too many demands. And then the man, the first same woman that the man found very attractive, now he finds her detestable, right? Because the constant demands being put. Similarly, the dealings with the children, as the children grow up and the children become rebellious, that mood change. But because the person has become now conditioned to this, conditioned to being attracted to the family, the person is unable to change. So he stays in this situation because of the conditioning, not because he's getting any pleasure. The sources of the pleasure have already gone, but he continues to stay because of his conditioning. So which is why Prabhupada is quoting Prahlad Maharaj, saying that while one's senses are strong, one should abandon grahasthashram and take shelter of the Lord, going to Vrindavan. Right? So this is one of the constant instructions by Prabhupada. He says, at the age of 50, one should take vanaprastha, because the person is young and strong enough to overcome the conditioning. Otherwise, Prabhupada says one will always remain trapped in family life to satisfy the tongue and the genitals in the association of the wife. One should understand one's position in family and worldly life. That is called intelligence. So, and I'll stop after this verse. Like I said, I'll share the table with you, but just quickly, the allegory that is given in verse 43, in verse 53, and the meaning. So in 53, it said that a deer is enjoying in the garden. The meaning is that a man is absorbed in household life. Then he's enjoying with his mate the aromatic flowers. So this means that in the company of his wife, he is enjoying sex life. Then his ears are attracted to the song of the bumblebees, which means that he enjoys talks with his wife and children. He moves about without considering the hungry tiger in front of him. So he forgets about time and that death is imminent. And then a hunter is behind him, ready to shoot him with arrows. Means that the superintendent of death is trying to kill him from behind. So they kind of condense to the point that Srila Prabhupada explains. Okay, so I'll pause over here and see if we have any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Regarding the urgency that I think you mentioned that in the last class also, I believe, how there's a difference between Prabhupada's time and time now. Somebody was sharing with you. Is that you or I heard from somewhere that how there was a sense of urgency at the time of Prabhupada, that everybody wanted to do things much more seriously, and that is kind of slackening or not there nowadays. So, and then you went on to talk about direct preaching, indirect preaching, and bridge preaching, and things like that. So I'm wondering whether there is any correlation between the two, in the sense, the reason for lacking this sense of urgency nowadays is because the preaching effectiveness is more towards bridge than towards direct. Or I don't know, can you throw some light on that? I'm thinking that is it because of the preacher's problem, or is it because the people who are taking to Krishna consciousness are not very serious? I'm talking about the initiated disciples in the movement. Are they not as serious as the Prabhupada's disciples? And or is it because the mentors or the spiritual mentors, they are not pushing the disciples to the extent that the Prabhupada pushed them? So can you please throw some light on that?
It's a very interesting observation, Prabhu, and frankly speaking, it's a little difficult to comment on it without becoming at least peripherally offensive, because one point that can be made is that Prabhupada instilled that sense of urgency in those he met because he himself had that sense of urgency. The corollary to that is that those who are preaching now lack that sense of urgency, right? And those who are preaching now are predominantly disciples of Prabhupada. Others are preaching, but so it would be offensive to characterize them as being lacking in any way, even though they themselves would be admitting the fact that Prabhupada is Prabhupada. Like when we hear from sannyasis, they will always glorify Prabhupada as Prabhupada, but it's okay for them to say, not for us to make that observation. What we can definitely speak about is ourselves, that we are, for whatever reasons, not able to develop that sense of urgency. That we are more than we can say I, that taking the process slowly and still attached to taking the deer allegory, still attached to the flowers and the roses and etc. Why is this happening more so as a phenomena? It's to some extent a function of the point Prabhupada made of boiling the milk, right? Prabhupada talked about it's good to have one disciple who is fully Krishna conscious, then have 100 disciples who are kind of Krishna conscious, right? But ISKCON is a preaching organization, and it's basically grown exponentially. When Prabhupada was there, the counts differed, but they may have been maybe 4,000 practicing devotees. Now there are more than 1 million practicing devotees there, depending on how, there's no cart carrying ISKCON members, but depending on attendance to the temples, that's how the kind of people are coming, right? So now within that million, there are many stars that are there also, right? So they're also shining. So we can take inspiration from that yes, there are many who are still kind of navigating the bridge, but there are also some who are taking the message seriously, dedicated their lives, and are progressing around it. So not really an answer to your question, but just sharing thoughts with you.
I'm also thinking that it is also to do with the people who have joined in Prabhupada's time were some to greater extent different from the people who are joining now. This very, very superficially saying, I don't know whether I'm right, but just observation as such. Nowadays, it is mostly family-oriented people, and culturally, Indian cultural background, most of them. In those days, in order to join the movement, they had to quit everything, their own culture and religion, everything they had to quit and join. But nowadays, that is not happening. It's very few of them are doing that, as opposed to in Prabhupada's time. So I thought that was one thing that also is a consideration, I guess. But yes, Prabhu, I agree with you that we cannot evaluate, we cannot judge our preceptors, but we can evaluate ourselves where we stand for sure. That's very important to do. My point was, that was one of my point. That the seriousness in us, as you said, in me also, is not that much there, and that's why I'm still struggling here. So anyway, just to reiterate that to my own self. Thank you.
Yeah, and it helps everyone to talk about this and discuss, because that's how we become more serious. I see Prem Kishore has said that this was discussed by Guru Maharaj. Maybe Prabhu, you can share the link to the lecture in the WhatsApp so people can listen to it. Okay, thank you. We'll end over here. So I also noticed that many devotees have stopped coming now. Do we know why? Oh, maybe it was a wrong question to ask. Okay. Somebody is on India trip, somebody is on vacation. Okay, different reasons. As long as I'm not driving them away, I'm okay. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय। शीला प्रभुपाद की जय। Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.